You're going to die at 89, in a house you haven't bought yet, on a street you haven't found yet, and the very last thing you're going to think about, with whatever clarity a dying brain has left, is one financial decision you made at 31 that you didn't think mattered at the time. He told you that part last. We'll get there. Right now, picture this. You're standing in your kitchen, cereal going soft in a bowl you're too tired to wash, and there's an old man sitting at your table who knows your name, your middle name, the name of the dog you had when you were 9 that nobody's mentioned out loud in 15 years. He's been talking for almost 4 minutes. You haven't said a word. And he just told you he has one sentence, one warning, 61 years of waiting to say it, and he's about to open his mouth. And then the stove clock blinks, and his outline goes soft at the edges like a photograph left too close to a window. And you understand, somewhere underneath the panic, that you might not get to hear it. Wait, you say. Wait, just say it. Just say the sentence. He looks at you for a long second, and instead of answering, he says something you don't expect. You should know how you got here first, or it won't land. So let's back up. Let's go back to the beginning, the actual beginning, because the sentence he's about to give you only means anything once you understand the road that led to that kitchen, that bowl of cereal, that 11:40 p.m. on a Tuesday you'll otherwise never remember. You were 31. You'd been at the same job for 4 years, the kind of job where the raises come in increments small enough that you have to check 3 pay stubs in a row to confirm they actually happened. $52,000 that year. Not bad, not exciting. You paid your rent on the first, your card balance hovered somewhere you didn't love but didn't panic about, and you had $6,200 in a savings account you opened in college and never really thought about again. You weren't reckless, you weren't disciplined either. You were the most common thing a person can be financially, which is unexamined. You did what felt reasonable in each individual moment and never once stepped back to look at the shape all those moments made together. The dishwasher had been broken for 3 weeks. You kept meaning to call someone. That detail matters more than it should, because it's the kind of detail that tells you everything about where your attention actually was. Not on the big picture, on getting through Tuesday. So when the man appeared at your table, you didn't think this is impossible. You thought distantly in the back part of your brain that handles dreams and déjà vu. Of course it's now. Of course it's not now when I'm not ready for anything. He told you he wasn't allowed to explain how this worked. No physics, no rules, no mechanism. Just that he had limited time and one thing he was permitted to give you. And he'd spent decades, actual decades, on the other side of a life you haven't lived yet, deciding exactly which sentence deserved that slot. You asked if you were going to be rich. He almost laughed at that. Not unkindly, the way you laugh at a question you used to ask too, before you understood it wasn't the right one. Wrong question, he said. Always was. He looked around your kitchen instead of answering directly. The takeout containers stacked from a week you were too tired to cook, the gym membership confirmation still sitting unread in your inbox notifications day 14, the credit card statement face down on the counter because you specifically didn't want to look at it tonight of all nights after a day like today. You think I'm here to tell you to save more, spend less, skip the car, stop the subscriptions you don't use. Everybody assumes that's the warning. It's the warning people give in commencement speeches because it's true enough to sound wise and safe, enough to never actually change anyone's life. So what is it? And that's when he said, you should know how you got here first, or it won't land. So he told you, not the way I just told you, slower, in pieces, like he was deciding in real time how much detail he could afford to spend before he ran out of whatever it is people like him run out of. He told you that the next 5 years of your life were going to look, from the outside, completely unremarkable. $52,000 climbs to $58,000. There's a year in there, 32, where nothing changes at all, where you'll feel like you're standing still while everyone around you posts vacations and engagement rings and down payments, and he wanted you to know that year matters more than any of the exciting ones. That's the year most people quit, he said. Not because anything goes wrong, because nothing visibly goes right, and waiting for a number to move when it isn't moving yet is its own specific kind of exhausting. You'll want to do something dramatic that year. Switch jobs out of restlessness. Take on debt you don't need. Anything to make the stillness stop. He told you, simply, don't. The stillness is not the problem. The stillness stillness is the part that's working. A promotion at 33 you don't think you've earned pushes you past $70,000, and you'll spend that whole year quietly convinced someone's going to figure out the mistake and take it back. Nobody does. Around 34, something shifts that you won't notice happening in real time. You stop checking your account balance out of fear and start checking it out of habit. That's not nothing. That's actually the hardest transition most people never make. He told you that part, you get right. Mostly. Mostly? You repeated? Mostly, he said again, and let it sit there. He told you about a smaller thing first, before Denver, because he said the small things are usually what set up the big one. At 35, a coworker named Renee is going to ask you to split the cost of a parking spot you don't actually need just because it's convenient and everyone else on the floor has one. You'll say yes because saying no feels cheap in a room full of people who don't think about money the way you've started to. $140 a month. Not a fortune, but he wanted you to notice that it's the same instinct scaled down. The discomfort of being the person who asks the boring question, who says, actually, let me think about that, who doesn't immediately match the energy of whoever's spending in the room. You're going to spend your whole life being offered chances to look slightly more careful than the room. Some of those chances are worth $140 a month. One of them, later, is worth a great deal more than that. Then, he told you about Denver. 2 years later, at 36, there's a conference, industry thing, 3 days, bad hotel coffee, name badges that fall off your lanyard by the second afternoon. You'll meet a man there named Patrick. Not his real name, you'll find out eventually, but that's the name that's going to live in your head for the next several decades, like a splinter that never fully works its way out. Patrick is good. Not good like a good person, good like a good performance, confident in the specific way that reads as competence to people who haven't learned the difference yet. Tan in February, which should be a clue and never is. He talks about deal flow, the way other people talk about weather, casually, constantly, like it's just the texture of his everyday life and not a thing he's performing for you specifically. He remembers small details about you from a 5-minute conversation the night before, your hometown, your sister's name, the fact that you mentioned liking a particular bourbon, and he uses every one of them, lightly, expertly, in a way that feels like friendship and is actually technique. He's going to tell you about a fund, private credit, he'll call it, a term that sounds technical enough to be real and vague enough to mean almost anything. 11%, guaranteed, paid out quarterly, backed by receivables from companies you've actually heard of, real ones, household names, which is the detail that does most of the convincing without you noticing it's doing any work at all. He'll pull out his phone and show you his own account statement, and here's the part the old man wanted you to sit with longest. It'll be real. It'll genuinely be his account, genuinely showing genuine deposits. That's not the lie. The lie is somewhere else entirely, somewhere you won't think to look. The deposits are real because Patrick is paying early investors with money from later ones, and right now, the night he's showing you your phone, you are early. That's the whole trick. You're looking at honest proof of a dishonest machine, and there is no way from where you're sitting to tell the difference. You're going to put in $40,000, he said. You felt something in your chest go cold at the specific number, not a round number, 40. He said it like he'd watched you type it into a wire transfer form himself, which, in whatever way this works, he probably had. Why would I do that if I'm careful by then, if I've already gotten the boring part right? Because you'll be tired, he said. Not lazy, tired. You'll have done everything correctly for 5 straight years. The saving, the budgeting, the slow, unglamorous Tuesday after Tuesday discipline. And somewhere in there, you'll develop a quiet, completely human hunger to have one thing move fast for once. 11% guaranteed is not going to sound greedy to you. It's going to sound like the reward you've earned for not being greedy the other 1,800 days before it. He let that sit. There's a moment, the night before you wire it, he continued. You're going to lie awake and almost not do it. Almost. You're going to open your banking app at 1 a.m. and stare at the transfer screen for 9 full full minutes. Your thumb is going to hover over confirm, and the thing that pushes you over isn't greed. It's a text from Patrick, sent at exactly 1:58 p.m. that says, completely casually, no pressure either way. Slot closes Friday though, totally your call. That's it. That's the whole mechanism. Not a hard sell, a soft deadline wearing the costume of no pressure at all. You're gonna tell yourself you're not the kind of person who falls for urgency, and then you'll fall for the version of urgency specifically designed for people who think that about themselves. 18 months later, the fund stops paying. Then it stops answering calls. Then there's an article, financial news, the kind with comment sections full of people listing the dollar amount they lost, like it's a contest nobody wanted to enter. You're not in the comments. You're too embarrassed to even read past the headline twice. $40,000 isn't the warning, he said. You'll survive $40,000. You'll cut back for about a year. You'll feel it in small ways. A vacation you don't take, a year where the 401k contribution stays flat instead of climbing, and then you'll move on. Most people can survive a $40,000 mistake. That's not what costs you the next 30 years. Then what does? What it does to you after. He leaned forward, and for the first time since he'd appeared, his voice had something in it that wasn't calm, something closer to urgency. 2 years after Denver, somebody's gonna offer you equity in something. Early stage, unglamorous, the kind of business that sounds almost boring when they describe it to you at a barbecue. No tan, no confidence performance, no statement waved in your face. Just a guy who's bad at pitching, mumbling through numbers that happen to be real. His name is gonna be Aaron. He's gonna fumble the explanation of his own company twice in the same conversation, and you're gonna say no. Why would I say no to something real? Because by then, you won't be able to tell the difference anymore. Not by vibes, not by confidence, not by how good the paperwork looks. You'll have trained yourself without meaning to that the feeling of this seems too good and the feeling of this is actually good arrive in your chest as the exact same sensation, and rather than learn to tell them apart, you'll do the easier thing. You'll decide the safest move is to stop listening to that feeling at all, permanently, for everything, forever, if nobody stops you. That business, he said, the boring one, the one you said no to, 14 years later is worth more than the entire apartment building you're standing in right now. Not because it was magic, because compounding doesn't care whether the thing compounding is exciting. It only cares whether you stayed in. You're gonna find out at 52 what it became. Aaron's gonna post about it, an anniversary thing, a thank you to early believers, and you're gonna read every word of it standing in a grocery store parking lot, and you're gonna feel something you don't have a clean name for. Not regret, exactly. Regret implies you could have known. This is quieter than regret. It's just arithmetic, sitting in your chest, refusing to leave. You sat with that. So that's the warning, you said. Don't trust people like Patrick. No, he said, almost sharp. That's the trap version of the warning. The version that sounds true and protects nothing. If I tell you don't trust confident men in Denver, you'll meet a confident man in Denver who happens to be honest, and you'll wreck a real opportunity out of fear. The warning was never about Patrick specifically. Patrick is just the costume the real danger happened to be wearing that particular year. Then what is the real one? Hold on, he said. One more thing first. Because you need the proof before you'll believe the sentence. He told you about the years in between, the ones that don't make a good story, which is exactly why he said they mattered most. The mid-40s, where nothing about your life will look remarkable from the outside. Same haircut for a decade, same car for longer than that, a kitchen that finally gets the dishwasher fixed, and then just quietly works for years without you thinking about it again. He told you that somewhere in there, around 47, you're going to sit down on a Sunday with an actual spreadsheet, not because a crisis forced you to, but because curiosity finally did. And you're going to realize you've crossed a number that 15 years earlier would have made you cry with relief. You won't cry. You'll just sit there, a little surprised at how undramatic it feels. And then you'll close the laptop and go make dinner. That's usually how it arrives, he said. Not with trumpets, with you closing a laptop and going to make dinner, the same as any other Sunday. Then he told you about the porch, a long way off, he said, further than you'll be able to picture clearly from where you're standing tonight. There's a Tuesday on a porch where you genuinely cannot remember the last time you opened your banking app out of fear instead of out of habit. Not because you got lucky, not because you got greedy and it paid off, because somewhere somewhere in the decades between this kitchen and that porch, you built something slow and unglamorous, and almost entirely invisible to anyone watching from outside, the same way every story about quiet wealth describes it. Boring, repeatable, nobody clapping, the kind of life nobody writes a think piece about. There's a dog on that porch, he mentioned, a different one than the one you had at 9, and you'll have a habit by then of telling it things out loud that you don't say to anyone else, mostly because by then, there's almost nothing left to be anxious about, and anxious people need somewhere to put the leftover energy. He told you he was there for that Tuesday. He remembers the weather. He remembers what he was drinking. He wasn't going to tell you any more than that, because some things you have to earn the memory of yourself. So I'm okay, you said. At the end, I'm okay. You're going to be exactly as okay as the decisions you make in the next 10 minutes after I'm gone, he said. That's not a dodge. That's the actual mechanism. Nothing about this is fixed. I'm not here because your story is already written. I'm here because there's a version of tonight where you forget this happened by Thursday, in a version where you don't, and only one of those versions ends on that porch. The stove clock blinked again, 11:47 to 11:48. His edges went soft, the way a photograph goes soft when you've stared at it too long under bad light. Say it, you said. Please, whatever you came here to say it now. And he did. The version of you that loses everything was never the one who took too few risks, and it was never the one who took too many. It's the one that let a single bad experience teach you to stop being able to tell the difference between excitement and evidence, and who never rebuilt that ability afterward, because rebuilding it felt more dangerous than staying numb. He paused. That's it. That's the whole sentence. Everything else, the saving, the parking spot, Patrick, Aaron, the porch, that was just the proof you needed to actually believe it instead of just hearing it. How do I rebuild it if it breaks? How do I tell excitement from evidence? He almost smiled at that, the closest thing to warmth he'd shown all night. One boring habit, he said, before you ever wire anyone to anything for the rest of your life. You ask for the paperwork, not the pitch, the actual filing. Who's registered where? Who audits it? Who's liable if it's wrong? Then you wait 72 hours, and you ask someone with zero financial stake in your answer whether it smells right to them. Every fake opportunity you will ever be offered cannot survive 72 hours of that question. Every real one won't even notice the delay. Aaron didn't notice. Patrick would have vanished by hour 30. That's it? That's the whole defense? That's the whole defense. It was never about discipline. You already had discipline. I watched you build it. Slowly, the boring way, the only way it actually gets built. What you didn't have was a filter for the moment something arrives wearing the exact costume of the reward you'd been working towards. That's the only moment that ever actually breaks people like us. Not laziness. Hunger pointed at the wrong door. One more thing, he added, already fading. You're going to want to tell people about tonight. Don't. Not really. Not in detail. Not because anyone would believe you. Because the moment you turn this into a story you tell at parties, it stops being something you carry and starts being something you perform. Keep it quiet. The quiet ones are the only ones that actually change anything. And then the chair was empty. You stood there a long time. The cereal had gone completely soft. The dishwasher was still broken. You'll tell yourself, probably by Thursday, that you fell asleep standing at the counter, that it was some strange stitched-together dream built out of a long day and a credit card statement you didn't want to look at. But 4 years from now, in a hotel conference room in Denver, with bad coffee and a lanyard that keeps slipping off your shoulder, a man is going to lean across a cocktail table and start talking about deal flow the way other people talk about weather. And before he finishes his second sentence, you're going to ask him a question he doesn't expect. Who audits the fund? He's going to hesitate, just slightly, just long enough, and in that half second of hesitation, you're going to remember a flannel shirt you don't own yet, a broken dishwasher, a bowl of soft cereal, and an old man who spent 61 years deciding which single sentence was worth coming back for. You're going to ask for the paperwork. 2 years after that, a man named Aaron is going to mumble through an explanation of a business that doesn't sound impressive yet, and you're going to remember the same lesson from the opposite direction, that the absence of polish is not the same thing as the absence of value. And this time, you're going to wait 72 hours. Ask someone with nothing at stake and say yes. That's the whole warning. It was never really about the $40,000, and it was never really about Patrick. It was about teaching you, just once, early enough to still matter, what the wrong kind of excitement feels like sitting in your chest, and what the right kind of boring feels like sitting next to it, so that the next time either one shows up, in whatever suit it's wearing, you don't mistake one for the other. You'll wash the cereal bowl. You'll call someone about the dishwasher tomorrow, finally. And somewhere underneath the ordinary shape of that ordinary Tuesday, something will have already changed, quietly, the way the things that actually save us almost always do. Years from now, on a porch you haven't found yet, with a dog you haven't met yet, you'll think about this kitchen sometimes, not often, just sometimes, on the kind of evening that doesn't need anything from you, when the quiet finally stops feeling like waiting and just feels like Tuesday. And you'll wonder, the way you do with most of the things that actually mattered, whether you really saw him at all, or whether some part of you had simply, finally, started listening to yourself.